Hi, I'm Sonia.
I'm Jonathan Ward.
Hi, and I'm Kimberly Lane. And together we're unlocking leadership. We're three experienced executive coaches with very different disciplines. In every episode, we take a question from a real client and provide key insights into address their challenges from our three different perspectives. It's a holistic approach to understanding challenges and opportunities. So let's get to it with today's question. Our question today is from Adrian from Baltimore, Maryland. He asks, there's an increased focus at our company for hiring in 2023. It's about the quality of hire or the quality of the candidate or QoH. What factors help determine quality of hire these days? Jonathan, what would you advise Adrian?
Hi, Adrian, and Happy New Year. Thanks so much for your question. Quality of hire is an interesting thing. It's a way for us to try to get a little bit more specific about things that in the past have been sometimes left more a feeling of kind of gut feeling as to how well a candidate does. Quality of hire is actually a way to try to quantize how effective our hiring process and onboarding process is for a company. And so what we're trying to do is come up with some objective measures that we can look at things like how well a new hire meets targets, how the turnover and retention rate and things like that, and then how well basically they fit in with the organization. Excuse me. So it is really kind of an attempt to make this a little bit more quantifiable rather than subjective. Companies do this a number of different ways, and chances are your company is already doing some of these things. Turnover and retention are obviously something that most companies measure. Companies that are getting farther ahead in quality of hire now also have some pretty good metrics around how you evaluate the productivity of an employee during their first year. What are the expected performance targets that they're going to have, and how well is that person doing against a benchmark for a new hire or somebody in that role? And then finally, there's more of a subjective kind of thing that's going to be based on the company's culture, and that may be things like the manager satisfaction or how well the employee fits in with the company culture, or even 360 ratings from their colleagues. But you come up with an index score, and then theoretically can measure year to year how well is that, how well is your process doing, how well is your company doing in terms of identifying and bringing on board the right people, and then making them as productive as possible during the first year. So that's in a nutshell what it's about. How about Sonia or Kimberly? What do you think?
I think it's just another way that we're really trying to get scientific about what our processes are. And because the cost of hiring somebody and putting somebody in the right seat is so expensive, it's at least 30% of somebody's first year salary, right? And that doesn't necessarily include your CEOs of the world, right? So it's really a way, like you stated, to put a qualitative number, be able to measure when you hire somebody, how quickly do they get up to speed? How productive are they? What are the retention rates you had mentioned as well? And I think it also helps by looking at those metrics for every single hire. You look at your investment related to that new hire, correct? And then, should they have to do a reduction in force, if you will, having that quality of hire can also be a way to assess, who are your best people and prevent you from potentially losing your best people during that process. But I think it's really the industry trying to be really scientific now because of the investment we make in the hiring process, and not only recruiting, but just making sure we put the right people in the right spot and we get the most productivity out of them. So, Sonia, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with what both of you say. And I would say that maybe the whole COVID experience, having to onboard people remotely, really caused companies to realize that there were some things that they were going to need to do differently, because you no longer could just check a box and know that the person was going to quote unquote be fit in and be able to generate whatever results it was that particular function or that particular role had. And so I think that the advice I have for Adrian is, so because they're looking for quality of hire, you should think of quality of company that you want to work for as well. It goes both ways, based on what you now know about yourself and what you know is important either to your career or to being able to be successful in the roles that you're taking on. I was working with a client recently, in which they brought on somebody and the person seems to have all the right experience in the right sectors and all of that, but they were concerned about a few things. And when I asked them, I said, so were you aware of these things when you were interviewing them? And they said, well, we thought that they might be important. And I said, did you bring them up to them? And they said, no. And I said, so basically they accepted the job based on all these other things that you agreed to, but you were not upfront with them and telling them that these were also things that you were going to be qualitatively measuring. And they said, you're right. And I said, it would be helpful. So potentially, Adrian, one of the things to do is inquire, what are the things that you're going to be measuring me on? And then what are the things that are important for you so that you have an actual real dialogue? Because I agree with Kimberly, the cost of replacing somebody gets more and more expensive. And with all the changes that are going on, we need to have people that are flexible and adaptable. And so being able to have that be sticky from the very beginning, I think matters. So that would be a recommendation that I would have.
It really resonates with me what you're saying, because part of the pressure has been on recruiters, of course, always in the past, to bring in the right people. But quality of hire, if you're really doing it right, it goes through the whole organization. That accountability has to go through the whole organization. The hiring manager has to ask the right questions during the hiring process. They have to be on board for what they're going to have to do to help bring that employee up to speed. You can't just sit them down in a room and let them try to figure it out. You've got to be actively participative as a manager to make sure that this employee is able to do what they need to do. And you need to figure out what's important to your company's culture and be able to measure that. I worked for one company that had a very rigorous hiring process. I remember going through 2 days worth of interviews to get interviewed. Wow. And they were a very data-based organization. And they actually went through and they were able to predict by looking at your ratings 2 or 3 years out, which of the interview questions appropriately selected the people. And so they would even fine tune their interview process based on your performance several years later. So that's how deeply you can drive this into an organization if you're really conscientious about it.
Yeah, I think it's really looking at the overall long-term performance of a given hire, not just the first 3 months, but really looking at the first year or several years in that position. And I think it's really good because I don't think we ever were tracking that in the past. We would just hire them and, we'd have our annual performance reviews and we'd give them a bonus or not. But really collectively as an organization, looking at every single position and every single person and having them on a metric to be able to compare them. Okay, so this hiring manager seems to have been doing exceptionally well in their quality of hires. This one, maybe not so much. They're getting 70% or 70 in the 72nd, percentile. Over here, they're getting 90 percentile. So what's going on? So just as there's a quality of hire, there should be a quality of interviewer, right? So really making sure that in the interview process, the people that are doing the interviewing are asking similar questions around culture, expectations, performance metrics, whatever else is involved in that role, working with team, collaboration, presentation skills, whatever it might be. But just as there is a quality of hire, there has to be a quality of interviewer consistent across the board. But I think it's really, again, just going back to being able to put a metric around this process to really see, are we doing it well? Are we getting a return on our investment versus just hiring this person and then no, they didn't work out, or they left, or we just didn't give them a raise this year. There's got to be more around that to be more effective at that, our investment around the hiring process. So
yeah, the other thing that I would say is true is different roles carry different impact to the organization. So I remember working a long time ago with an organization that qualified certain roles as A roles, B roles, and C roles in terms of how much impact and effect they might have on the organization. And they put special attention to the hiring of the A roles because those you could measure significantly. That could move the needle by 10% or 15% versus others might not move it as much. And so you didn't have to be as exacting on that. Going back to what you said, Jonathan, I actually worked with an organization many years ago that after they had selected somebody that they thought they were going to hire, prior to them officially having them start, they actually met with somebody who was a psychologist. And all he did was he talked to them for about an hour. And they didn't have to answer, they just answered a few questions with him. talk to her for an hour, and he would actually predict how long they would be there and whether they would be like growing up the ladder and to what level. And many, many, many years later, I ended up meeting him and I said, what were you doing? How could you do this? He said, it was about being able to understand who they were and what their why was. When I understood their why and I understood how they'd gone about making those things happen in the past, I just applied it to the future. And I thought, wow. But, and obviously he was on retainer and he was effective. And maybe, I don't know if that would work today based on so many changes happening, but I thought it was interesting. It was like, talk about quality of hire. Expert. Which one is your job? Expert in quality of hire.
Yeah.
Anything else anybody wants to share about this? Anyway, thank you, Adrian from Baltimore, Maryland, today for your question. We hope you, our viewers and listeners, have a better understanding of what to consider when the focus is on the quality of the candidate. To our listeners, if you like the content we shared today, please like the episode and also share and subscribe to our YouTube channel, unlockingleadership-askthecoaches.com. We look forward to reading your reviews. You can also find Unlocking Leadership Ask the Coaches on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. If you have a leadership question or would like to reach out to one of our coaches, please email us at info@unlockingleadership-askthecoaches.com. We would love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us today, and tune in next time to find the keys to unlocking your best leadership.